a matter of hours, the 8th Parliament will be dissolved. A new Speaker of Parliament will be elected, and the 9th Parliament will begin their work. President-elect John Dramani Mahama is pushing for current Speaker Alban Bagbin, and in fact is written to the NDC MPs, mandating them to retain him. Let's discuss this. It's a great lineup. We have Dr. Asa Sante, political scientist. We have Dr. John Osai Kwapong, CDD fellow. We have Clement Akolo, he's Comms Director for Parliamentary Network Africa. Of course, standing by in studio with me is Isaac Kofieje, Research and Data Analyst. And in fact, I want to start with Isaac because he's going to give us a general overview of the 8th and 9th Parliaments. Kofieje, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, sweetie.
Take us away.
Well, so this is actually how the 9th Parliament will be. But of course, this morning we'll be blending both the 9th and 8th Parliament, trying to analyze how the 8th Parliament pan out and perspectives for the 9th Parliament. So if you see this donut chart, that gives you a clear indication where the majority and minority will be in the 9th Parliament. Although, of course, we are not done with the composition of how the 9th Parliament will look like, but per the data that we've been putting together, we know that the NDC at the moment are holding about 183 out of the 276 and MPP 88. We still have independent candidates, still around 4, very significant. And I'll tell you something about the independent composition of Parliament in this Fourth Republic. We still have just one outstanding, constituency to be declared. I think it's Ablekuma North, right? Yeah. And if that comes in, I mean, it will tell us whether the NDC will be able to get outright the two-third majority that they've been looking for. It's not just about getting majority, but getting it in a super way at the moment is what the NDC is looking out for. So 83 will not really give you the absolute majority, but if they're able to get 184, one more, it will show you that they will have that absolute majority that they are looking for. And if you look at, different parliaments under the Fourth Republic, you will know that the independent candidates always, sort of like decide to roll or play ball with the majority. So in this case, I am hoping that what happened in 2000, where NPP actually had exactly half of the members of the House, 100 out of 200, and they were able to convince, other political parties to come on board. Back then, our parliament was very, very dynamic. You used to have more than 4 parties in Parliament. This time around, it's always been the 2 political parties, MPP and NDC. And if you are lucky, we'll have some, independent candidate. That's what is going to pan out this year. We're not going to have other political parties, but definitely the 4 independent candidates you see here, very significant. It will be interesting to see which side they choose to play ball with, and if that will actually give the NDC the super majority that they are actually looking for. Now, talking about how Parliament has looked like since the Fourth Republic, this chart on the Smart Wall gives or paints a picture of how this has been. We decided to use this line graph to tell you how, Parliament has been in terms of the arrangement, majority and minority, how close has it ever been? And we know, of course, the 8th Parliament, which has a lot of, features, was the one that delivered for the first time in the Fourth Republic a hung parliament where both political parties had 138, 130, had to take the independent candidates who, of course, cross-capital to the NPP to break that boundary. And if you look at it, you will see that right from 1996, there was always that clear difference between majority and minority. And just look at the gap analysis from 1996, 2000 was very close. I was talking to you about how the NPP managed to get exactly half of that number, had to convince other political parties, the PNCs and all of those ones to come on board. That happened in the 2000 or the 2nd Parliament. And in the 4th Parliament or the 3rd Parliament, we saw the gap widening. NPP actually had a very clear majority in 2004, starting from 2005. 2008, we saw that closeness again in Parliament. Then 2012, when John Dramani Mahama was given his first term, he won with 50.3% or 7%, and he was able to get 125 out of the 275. That was the first time we were actually moving from 230 members of Parliament to 275, and the NDC won majority was very clear. Then 2016, people always say that what happened in 2020 was exactly 2024 was exactly the same thing that happened in 2016. So just look at the gap between MPP and NDC in terms of the parliamentary composition or the arrangement. 169 versus 106. That was a super clear majority for the NPP, but they were not able to cross the line of 184 or get more than that to get the absolute majority, the 2/3 majority that the NDC is looking for. Now, very clear, we've spoken about 2020, but just look at the 2024. This is the widest gap we've ever had. It didn't even happen in 1996, possibly 1992, because the NPP decided to boycott that parliamentary election. But since 1996 and 2016, we've never had such a wide, majority. And this is the first time that is going to be delivered to the NDC. We'll see what they will do with it. We all saw the features of the 8th Parliament where, the infamous e-levy was passed. The brawl in Parliament. In fact, the election of the
I like where you're going. So I think it's a great opportunity for me to bring in our guest. Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, good morning. Happy New Year to you on the show. If I can hear you.
Good morning to you too, and Happy New Year as well.
Great. Dr. Kwame Asante, are you with us? Good morning.
I am with you.
Fantastic.
Good morning,
in fact, yes, you are my two favorite doctors with hyphenated names. Dr. Asante, I'm saying you are my two favorite doctors with hyphenated names, Dr. Asante and Dr. Osai-Kwapong. Let me start with you.
Is that we all come from the same family.
No okay, but I want to start with you, Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. From your perspective, I know this is a review of the 8th Parliament and maybe expectations of the 9th, but let's do a more general assessment first before we get surgical with it. From your perspective, how do you assess the effectiveness of parliamentary oversight? In fact, of this 8th Parliament, what would be your general assessment of how they fared?
Overall, there were very great expectations because of the configuration, right? That people expected that, given the numbers, we would see more, or should I say, we would see greater oversight of the executive. But I think we saw more, spirited fights, and opposition from the NDC minority in Parliament. Some way, somehow, though, in as slim as their majority was on key policy issues, on issues of the budget, the MPP majority still found a way to muscle its way out of some of the issues that came to the floor. E-levy, for example, is one of the policies that immediately comes to mind. That you would have thought that, given some of the public outcry against the idea and the strong opposition that the NDC mounted in Parliament, that it would have actually resulted in the defeat of that policy idea, but it didn't. What the last comment that I'll add, though, is that for me, what it ended up doing, though, is we saw a lot more adversarial type of politics, where the two parties were constantly at each other. And I think it gave both parties a rethinking of, is this the kind of parliament we want to see in the near future, which is closely divided, which is why you would see in the 2024 election, as part of their campaign strategies, emphasis on, if you vote for our presidential candidate, please remember to also vote for our parliamentary candidate. But that would be my initial comments.
Right. Dr. Kwame Asante, given the unique power dynamics of the 8th Parliament and how, should I say, the dynamics shaped governance in Ghana, how well do you think they fared, would you say?
I think we had the best of times, and in terms of work, we had the best that we could ever pray for. Given the tight nature of the numbers that we had in Parliament, we were not expecting anything more than that. But for me, what stood out clearly was the use of power and how it was checked, right? The government didn't have absolute majority or even more numbers to, as it were, to play down the work of the minority. So there was a real check of, power. And for me, it resonated well with me in the sense that any power that is not checked properly is subject to abuse. So we saw a real check of power, and that translated into policies that they churn out, that they needed to, do the consultation and then consensus building on that in order to arrive at a decision that will, rub off everybody. And that is refreshing to me, because then we saw how they had to all the time work together as a team, but not as political entities who were championing their own interests. So you saw the national interest, at least to a large extent, protected. All right. Another thing that also came in was the fact that the real test of rule of law and separation of powers was brought to the fore. Let's start with the rule of law. Every issue, people thought that if they did not get a clear signal from Parliament, they rushed toward the court to seek redress. For me, these are the building blocks of every democracy, that you don't resort to violence, you don't resort to unorthodox ways of doing things, but that you go to the law and then seek redress. For me, it was refreshing. It had its own challenges, but it was also brought to sharp focus. People thought that the Parliament had absolute powers to do what the Constitution has said, because it's a separate entity. So the issue of separation of powers, people were confused as to whether it was working. But I can say without fear of contradiction that separation of powers in the strictest form as propounded by Baron de Montesquieu doesn't exist anywhere. What exists is what checks and balances, that the bulk of your functions are given to you, but slices are given to others to serve as a check on you. So even though Parliament had enormous powers to do its basic work, there are other oversight responsibility on the part of other institutions, i.e. the judiciary, i.e. the executive, on the part of Parliament. We saw that playing out in, and almost ruffle the foundation or the feathers of Parliament. And for me, it was a good thing, because it gave us opportunity to test our democracy, the institutions that support democracy. We saw how, they responded to that. You saw the legislature being, attacked. You saw the Supreme Court also brought to question. You saw how the executive also fed into all these things. And the people who were the recipient of all this and the basis of democracy, you saw their reaction and all that. For me, all these activities gave us food for thought. And today, we know that there are certain gray areas. If we want this ninth Parliament to survive and survive forever, we should be able to strengthen the frontiers and make sure that we inject in more energy, and make sure also that all the dots are placed at the right position and the T's are crossed. And that, if we are able to do this, we should have a very interesting Parliament. I must also add that despite the fact that the NDC is gradually moving towards an absolute majority, for me, it doesn't change anything at all, because any power that is given to any human being or institution, there is also a corresponding checks on that. And even if it doesn't work in Parliament, we, the people outside, we can also speak truth to power. And our action is what has resulted in the dynamics we have in Parliament. So it tells us that we are the ultimate recipient of all the actions, and sovereignty resides in us.
Consensus-based model, or are we seeing deepened polarization? I saw Dr. John Osai-Kwopo mention adversarial politics. Which is it? Is it a deepened polarization, or is it more consensus-based model now?
Are you talking to me, Siki?
Yes, please. Yes, Dr. Asante. I mean, the question is for both of you, but let me start with you. I'm saying that you said this Parliament has given us some things to think about, food for thought. And I'm asking if, does that mean, or can we infer from the work they did, that Ghana's Parliament is evolving towards a more consensus-based model, or are we seeing a deepened polarization? And I also added that because Dr. John Osai-Kwopo mentioned adversarial politics that we saw, Which is it? Are we moving towards a consensus-based, parliamentary model, or are we seeing deepened polarization?
Parliament work has always been with consensus. That is the pivot around which parliament work revolves. There's no doubt about that. But time and again, sometimes you have controversies. You recall that last, parliament, at least 2024, or from its inception, from the 2021, we saw, because of the hanged nature, obviously you should expect controversies, and controversies were, all over. But you also can attest to the fact that in spite of the controversies, MPs managed to do parliamentary business. Whoever thought that they will be able to get around e-levy? But at the end of the day, they all smoked peace pipe. They, sat down and dialogue. Consensus became the order of the day, and they passed it, right? They were able to do a lot of things based on consensus. But it is true that at the tail end, there were certain disagreements that also shook the foundation of parliament. It is to be expected of a parliament of that nature. So that is fine. But all in all, you realize that when there are difficulties and they want to build peace, they know what to do. But from where I sit, I don't see any, parliament that is going to be divided and create problems and all that.
Right.
We've gone past that era. What we are looking forward to is that in spite of the great numbers the NDC has, they will be able to do a good job. And thank God you have a speaker like Urban Bagben today. Obviously, I have no doubt in my mind that the people will vote him into office and all that. He is going to be that fine line to ensure a proper balance and all that. Because of the numbers, you need somebody who will put his foot down. We need somebody who will be able to ginger the minority to stand on their feet in spite of their numbers and all that. So I believe all is going to work out in a certain manner. But more effort also must come from we the people, the kind of input we give into parliamentary work, so that they don't take us for granted. When we leave everything to them, obviously, party interests will reign supreme. But remember that power emanates from the people. We are the basis of democracy.
Right.
On that note, we need to contribute our quota more effectively to shape the frontiers of the work that you do there.
Thank you. Dr. Osai-Kwapong, do you agree?
To a large extent, yes. My slight disagreement with my big brother, Dr. Sasante, is the fact that I still think that we're seeing a lot more polarization, right? And if you look at the 8th Parliament, you saw that hardening of positions. You saw quite a few more walkouts by either side on some of those issues. And yes, even though things went through, I didn't see it as a reflection of consensus building, but more of as a way of the majority, even how slim their majority was, still being able to muscle their way through. Now, you're going into an 8th Parliament where just shy of one seat, the NDC would have, a supermajority. But even without that, they have a really strong majority in Parliament, which there is that temptation then to continue with the old adage that says the minority can have its say, but the minority would have its say, but the majority would have its way. There's no incentive for the NDC in principle to try and build any consensus. I saw a joke on social media where somebody said, look, the NDC can even run double track and they will still have majority in Parliament. But having said that, some important changes to the standing orders of Parliament happened under the 8th Parliament. And it's actually one of the good things that came out of the 8th Parliament, which hasn't gained enough traction. from what I also understand, it was work that was begun in the 7th Parliament. But having said that, there are a number of important committees that would now be chaired by the party that is in the minority. I think the Budget Committee, already the Public Accounts Committee is chaired by the party in minority, the Appointments Committee. And then I think there are one or two very important committees that would be chaired by the minority party. For me, that would be a good thing to allow the minority party to be able to make contribution and also have a significant say in matters that would come before Parliament. And hopefully some of those mechanisms at the committee level would allow both parties, as you said, to move more towards a consensus building approach and move away from some of the deepening polarization and the adversarial nature of our politics.
Right.
Sometimes.
Thank you so much. Let's get some more perspective from Kofi Eje, and then we'll come back and discuss some legislative achievements and failures and structural reforms, if any. Kofi Eje, tell us more.
Well, so, I mean, talking about the composition of Parliament, I believe that, the regional distribution is very, very important. We'll come to the election of the speakership. I mean, that also tells you the direction of that the Parliament will also go. This will not be the first time should Alban Bagbin maybe not get the vote to become the speaker. We all know what happened in 2021 when the NPP actually presented Professor Michael Quay to be re-elected. We all saw what happened. But what will be different this time around is the numbers. And this current Parliament, just like the 8th Parliament, will definitely be about the numbers. And this time around, the favor is actually, or the domain is in that of the NDC. And even if you have majority or some of your members chairing committees, I mean, the numbers will always mean when it comes to decision making. But on the smart world, we want to look at the regional distribution. It is important to point out the numbers for both sides in terms of the regional distribution. Which side? I mean, for the first time, we have NPP not having representation or members of parliament in about, I think, more than 3 regions. So we'll be looking at that, and the independent candidates as well. So let's start with some of the swing regions. Most of them have been bellwether, and usually if you want to test the direction of the country, you look at how the 3 bellwether regions. Greater Accra wasn't in 2020, but still remains a bellwether in 2024. We want to look at it. If you look at the Western region, for instance, and the 17 seats that were available, just look at it. The NDC takes 15 of the 17 seats, leaving just 2 for the NPP. In terms of the independents, just 0. I mean, the Central region, 18 versus 4. Greater Accra, just look at it, 28 versus 3. And they also have the voter region, 18-0. Now, if you look at the numbers, it will tell you why we have such numbers in Parliament. But the interesting thing is that MPP will not have MPs in regions like the Bono East region and also in the OT region. They have 0 MPs there. In the Upper West region, which has always been the case, 0 also. I mean, there were times that they actually made some improvement. But in terms of the newbies, right, Sweetie, it would be good to talk about the debutants. We are still studying the data. But what we have is that at least there could be about some 120 debutants in this, 9th Parliament. That signals a lot. That, tells you about the nature of how the 9th Parliament will be, where we'll be taking you through some of the experienced hands who will not be coming back again, some of which decided not to even, do a re-election in the primary, some of whom also lost in the main election. But 120 debutants, that is very significant in the 9th Parliament, and to really, really, shape how discussions will be, experienced, and what have you will come to play. And we all know that Mahama wants to operate a very lean government. And people are saying that if you look at the sheer number of MPs that he has at the moment. Just look at it, going to elect some 60 or 65 ministers and members of in their deputies from 183 or 84. It will be very difficult. But maybe where he will take a shield, it will be possibly, shelter will be the fact that you have a number of debutants, of which the NDC has majority of that.
Kofi, I do want to bring in our guest again, but do you have some more slides to share with us?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get through yours quickly before we get back to our guests.
I mean, I just wanted us to go through female representation. I wanted to come have a discussion. I don't know if it's time, it would be the right time to speak about that, but for me, female representation in Parliament is very, very important. We've been championing this over the years. And if you just look at the chart on the smart wall, you can see an increment in the numbers. But the fear is that we may have a dip in the 9th Parliament, looking at how some of the outcomes in some of the constituencies actually went. It could be that we may end up with about 40 or the same number of females in Parliament, just like we had in the 8th Parliament. At the moment, we can count about 39, which is still around the 15% we had in the 8th Parliament. But the story is much clearer when you look at it on the percentage terms. That you have a Parliament and you have just females just comprising about just 15%. The highest we've had so far is 15%. And that was a big achievement for us in the 8th Parliament. In the 9th Parliament, we may have the same 15%, but in terms of absolute decimal points, it may be lesser than what we had in the, you know, the 8th Parliament. So we'll be speaking more on you know, the distribution of the females, but I think that I should go back to
yes, when
we come back, we'll look at the distribution.
Thank you, Kofi. So let me throw this question to Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. What challenges and opportunities do you foresee for the new Parliament, looking at the number of new entrants that we have coming into the 9th Parliament?
So in terms of the challenges, especially as you look at the number of new entrants that you have, it takes quite a bit to get up to speed on, you know, parliamentary business, learning. You know, there's always a learning curve for new parliamentarians, how you navigate parliamentary work, how you navigate floor business, you know, and all of that. That is why, not just in the case of Ghana, but worldwide in every legislative body, you always still want some experienced hands present who can mentor the new ones and who can show them, you know, the ropes. So with that many, excuse me, there's that challenge of working hard to get them up to speed, you know, on the nature of parliamentary business.
Okay.
But in terms of opportunities, there's, again, for me, some of the work that has been done to do some reconfiguration at the committee level provides Parliament an opportunity to allow the minority to be very involved in significant ways on some important matters that would come before the House. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the work happens at the committee level before it comes to the floor. So there is an opportunity to do a lot of work at the committee level. Okay.
And Dr. Kwame Asante, you can reflect on the same question briefly, but what I want to find out from you is that, you know, this 8th Parliament was known for intense debates on budgetary allocation and, you know, fiscal policies. How effective do you think these debates were in shaping sound economic governance? And after you reflect on the question of opportunities and challenges for the new entrants.
Let me look at the opportunities and challenges for the new entrants. We know nobody was born in Parliament. We all go there, build capacity, and then be able to do the work that they are required to do. It is on the basis of this that Parliament also, as part of its, you know, process of bringing everybody up to speed, they have the socialization process where they inculcate certain values in people. They walk them through the ABC of parliamentary work, and out of that, the people also build capacity. We have no hand in strictly determining, you know, whether to maintain experienced people or all that. But the dynamics that are associated with voting and the rest of them shape people who go into parliament. So when we realize that at a point in time, people have becoming non-performing MPs, obviously we'll kick them out. So we should brace ourselves for these things. And I believe that all over the world, we always have experienced hands. They lose them and all that. Sometimes not even through elections, but natural causes such as death. Today, we are speaking about parliament and we don't have DH Mensa there. It's a very great figure. Those who are even alive are old, they are not around. Kwekuba and Co, they are home as old people and all that. But the good news is that because it has an institution, it has an institutional memory, these things are impacted on people. So in no time, they will learn the ropes and live up to expectation because Parliament is a going concern. That aside, you look at how the activities shape legislation and all that. I think that, generally speaking, they did their best to work out on bills and improve them and all that. But as children of Oliver, we always want improved legislations that will stand the test of time. The good news today is that input into Parliament, you have a lot of think tanks, a lot of scholars who avail their services to Parliament in the form of memorandum that Parliament extend to everybody, including these groups. My brother Osan Kwapons, their outfit, CDD, IDEC, and the rest, and from certain groups and all that, they have and continue to contribute toward the shaping of our bills and making serious input. So I believe that Parliament will continue to draw on their services so as to shape the work of the 9th Parliament. I have no doubt in my mind that all these things will work. And where there are weaknesses, the think tanks, research institutions are always out there doing research to see where they go wrong, and then they touch on that. I recall, if you read CDD report, early reports, they look at the fact that we did not have, private member bills. If you read a CDD early report, they touch on that because there were findings, research to that effect. Today, private member bills are a feature of Ghanaian lawmaking, and that is a good thing. So we will expect that we'll get those services from those institutions. Of course, when it comes into politics, people run them down, tag them with all manner of names simply because it doesn't go in their favor. But that is to be expected.
Right.
But what I want is that Parliament should make do with all these research work, which is free of charge to them, and then use it to build capacity and make Parliament able to do the work that is required of them.
Thank you, Dr. Kwame Sasson. Now let's move the conversation forward and talk about Alban Bagbin and that mandate that President-elect John Dramani Mahama gave to the NDC MPs. And Dr. John Osai Kwapong, how does the retention or replacement of Alban Bagbin influence parliamentary agenda? I mean, particularly in terms of reforms, legislative priorities, and all that.
I've talked about some of the important changes that were made to the standing orders, the work that was finalized under his watch. And as difficult as the composition of the 8th Parliament made parliamentary business sometimes, I think overall he managed to still keep the House intact. He managed to get important parliamentary work done. And I think that is also because he himself, comes to the role of Speaker as an experienced member of Parliament. He served both as a majority leader as well as a minority leader. And so it's a step in the right direction. I believe that he would bring the same leadership qualities, skills, and everything to the 9th Parliament. The only thing that I would add, though, is that he would have to find a way to make sure that the minority is really heard, which I believe he can and he will. Because again, when you have 180-something seats in Parliament and an almost supermajority, there would always be that temptation on the part of the NDC caucus to feel like they really don't have to, hear the minority side. But I believe that Speaker Bagbin would definitely be able to, use his leadership skills and experience to lead the House and make sure that he treats both sides very fairly.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the Speaker's performance in the 8th Parliament?
I will give him an 8 out of 10.
Okay. Where does the remaining 2 go? what are the gaps that account for those? That's 2 that is missing.
Well, 8 out of 10 is still for me a good score. It was a very difficult Parliament, to manage. I think I keep 2 of those points because I feel like some things could have been resolved internally. I mean, I don't entirely blame him for it, but given the configuration, we saw a lot more running to the courts to resolve certain matters that I feel could have been resolved internally, because it has the potential to weaken Parliament as an institution. But I mean, overall, I think an 80% score for him is a good score.
But the issue about going to court, in fact, let me throw that to Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante. Some would argue that it's more about the leadership, parliamentary leadership, and how they manage conflicts between minority and majority factions in Parliament. And we know that the incoming minority are retaining Apenyo Markin. So I guess I'm asking Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, what role do you think parliamentary leadership plays in managing conflicts? And case in point, the way the NPP ran to courts here and there, and, the commentary that if Osei Mensah Bonsu was the leader, some of these issues might have been avoided.
Let us make it straight here that nobody's service is indispensable. Remember, even if you are the Alpha and Omega, you will die one day. You will not be in Parliament. So, and remember also that every leader has his own style. And but what is interesting is that they try to use the law to address their issue. There is nothing wrong about that. But when it becomes consistent, then it also have its own ramifications on the work of Parliament. But that aside, it brings to sharp focus all that we are talking about, the issue of Parliament sitting down to craft something that would deal with the political questing doctrine, that there are matters that ought to be dealt with at political level instead of legal level. And that need to be, look at and then address. Is something that Ghana must focus the attention on, so that we don't spend on unnecessary time going to court and all that. Because sometimes when you see the ruling of the court, they hand it down. Yes, but there are certain things that also come to add up onto the problems that we have. The ruling about 97(1)GH, yes, has been handed down. But you and I know that there are also problems. Problem of representation. The 3 months window, that when the Supreme Court at a point in time was saying that the 4 people you want to ask them from Parliament, let them go, because otherwise the people will lose representation. But my question is that 90-day rule, 90-day, 3 months to election, when somebody ceases to be an MP, what happens? Do the people still have representation? So all these things come up under the umbrella of we looking at what the political question doctrine and see things that Parliament should do that the judiciary should not come in. And when we are able to do this, the consensus will already be done. And then Parliament will be able to do more effective work. In terms of scoring of marks, I will score back then 9/10.
Okay.
And I will leave 1 to what the English scholars will call mechanical accuracy for the dots, the T's, and all that. But I will score him now 9, in the sense that he was able to put his foot down and ensure that Parliament did what was expected of it. And I also, from where I sit, I admire his courage, that he was not shaken by any threat or any whatsoever. He stood his grounds and all that. This is a mark of what a leader that we need in Parliament. Fear not, do the right things, and then leave the comments and other noises to be made. It's part of the process.
Okay, thank you so much. So 8 and 9. I do have Edem Agbana joining us via phone. He's one of the new entrants, MP-elects for Ketu North. Eden, welcome to the program. I want to hear from you in terms of readiness to enter Parliament in a matter of hours, and what challenges you foresee and how you intend to fix them. Oh, I'm told we just dropped, Eden Magbane's line just dropped, unfortunate. But let's go on with the conversation. So, Dr. Kwame Asasante, what would be some of the highlights in terms of legislative achievements, the laws, and the key issues that you think marked or would become the legacy of the 8th Parliament as the exits in a matter of hours?
On top of my head, you can look at how they were able to come out with the e-levy, even though it was very unpopular, legislation for me, and where I said from state capacity angle, that the state you should be able to attract resources to run its own affairs. So on that score, even though there were a whole lot of noise and all that, they came to a compromise that 1% on electronics taxation is important, even though that did not suffice, giving the kind of demands on our hands. But for me, the way they manage it and at the end of the day pass it into law, it was a big achievement for us. That going forward, if we are able to put our house in order and then be realistic, we should be able to do certain things, bearing in mind all the differences, and at the end of the day, arrive at something that will stand the test of time. That for me was a good one. And then I think last minute, the way they handle the affairs of the court and all that, yes, even though at a point in time, it nearly, it even undermined the work of Parliament at the last end. But for me, the good aspect is that it brought to sharp focus some of the lingering challenges that confront Parliament, for which reason all of us have to sit down and see the way forward so that in the next election, all these things will not rear their ugly hairs in the work that Parliament does. Now, we still have a problem that 3 months, 6 months, 3 months to election, if the seat becomes vacant, what do we do? It's something we need to think about if we believe in representation. 2, we also want to find out I still have my challenge with the ruling of the Supreme Court is that when now the ruling that has been churned out, what it means that my understanding is that representation is going to be affected in a certain way. Yeah. Somebody in Parliament, and then he's giving a contract, 4-year contract, be there and represent our interests and our aspirations. 6 months to election, he has found a new love with another political party, and we still maintain him. It undermines loyalty, and it breaks what social contract that in Parliament we can put people in there, but when they get there, they can change their minds, and that is going to have its own consequence on the work of Parliament. Okay. But I think that that aspect of legislation and the matters that arose out of this give us a lot of learning lessons that going forward, we need to look at them and address them head on.
Thank you. Dr. John Osai-Kwapon, I want your highlights as well, but I do want a reflection first on how Parliament's handling of that e-levy controversy. And maybe I should include that passing of legislative instrument that allowed mining in our forest reserves, how that impacted public trust in the legislative process.
And I'm glad you highlighted especially the mining, the permission to be able to mine in our forest reserves. For me, that was a low point, given all the concerns that were already being expressed about the activities of, Galamsey, the need for environmental protection, and to think of the fact that there's a reason why we have forest reserves. There's a reason why we try to protect certain parts, of the nature that has been bequeathed to us. Definitely, for me, was a low point. I know that one of the unfinished business of this 8th Parliament was going to be a reversal of that, except that I don't think they have time to get that done, but it would have been very good to reverse that. With the e-levy, I understand the fiscal imperative of why the government needed that e-levy. I mean, we were in a fiscal crisis. Part of the IMF program eventually was how we are able to improve on our revenue generation. But I think that it was the ruling party was not willing, in my opinion, to listen enough to the concerns from the minority side. And so it became an either-or proposition, and both sides then hardened their stance on the e-levy. The ruling party touted it as, I can count the number of promises that were made in terms of what the e-levy will be able to do. But bottom line, the e-levy was about how we address our fiscal challenges and how we address, enough revenue. The whole e-levy cake thing, didn't also help with that conversation. Perhaps if we had treated it, in terms of building more consensus around it, maybe it would have generated more political support. Because if you look at the most recent Afrobarometer, is there only one key government policy that majority of respondents wanted it gone, compared to other ones like, for example, the free SHS.
In fact, so there's still a suit on it, I believe. After the NDC walked out, they took it up to court, and it's still pending in the Supreme Court, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's also one of those things that I think gave people a pause about the Supreme Court, right? In terms of you have something that has lingered for more than 2 years with no decision on what they thought of it. And again, the policy has already been implemented, all of that. So now, for me, it even becomes, a moot point. But it also, for me, brings back my earlier point of, in the 8th Parliament, because of the numbers, you saw some of these important things now being, taken to the court as opposed to resolving them, internally. Because the precedents that the court sets can have an impact on Parliament as an independent institution. And I don't want Parliament to get to the point where, because of legal precedent, it would appear as though it always, quote unquote, needs permission,
right,
from the courts before it can act. And I hope the 9th Parliament would guard against that. Okay,
right before we conclude, let me bring in Edem Agbana. He joins us via phone, and he's one of the new entrants. So we want to see or hear from him in terms of how prepared you are. Edem Agbana, thank you for joining us. MP-elect for Ketu North, congratulations. Tell us how ready you are, what challenges you foresee, and how you intend to navigate them.
Thank you for having me. Let me say good morning to all our cherished listeners. To Professor Asa Asante, my lecturer at the University of Ghana. And I appreciate him so much for his guidance and support. He really made me appreciate research in politics and why it is important as a candidate to take some key indicators seriously. And I can attribute my huge success to his guidance and support as well. So let me use your platform to appreciate him. Well, in a couple of hours, we will be sworn into office as members of Parliament. I must say, I'm looking forward to that moment with excitement. I am ready, I am prepared, and I am excited that I will be part of the 9th Parliament, which for me is Parliament, or it's a session that will be full of many, many historic moments. I am particularly happy that the Right Honorable Alban Bagbin will be the speaker for this session as well, because he comes into the office as the most experienced parliamentarian Ghana has ever had. And we all saw how he managed to effectively navigate through a very difficult 8th parliament. And so when you have a parliament that about 42 of us entering are young ones, we are below the age of 40, you clearly will need an experienced leader to steer the affairs of the House. And so I am happy that he has been retained, or he will be retained as Speaker tonight. And I'm happy to learn under his feet and under the feet of all the other seniors so that we can all contribute to effective lawmaking and play our role as our oversight responsibilities to put the government on their toes and ensure that we deliver on the mandate that the people of Ghana gave us on the 7th of December. Right.
Edem Agbana, thank you so much for spending a bit of your morning with us. We also have Jerry Ahmed. He's MP-elect for Wejagba. We just want to understand how these new entrants are feeling going into Parliament in a matter of hours. Jerry Ahmed, thank you for joining us. You're going into Parliament today. How does it feel?
It is humbling.
Kindly speak up for me. And what are your expectations?
It's humbling. For me, it's an expression that I just need to show appreciation to my constituents for their trust and support, and also acknowledge the significance of the swearing-in as a milestone in my political journey and a call to serve my constituency and my country, Ghana. It's really touching, and we can only say that I'm deeply humbled by that mandate given to me by the people of Wejagba, the very good people of Wejagba. Today marks the beginning of a journey to represent their voices and to represent their interests with integrity and with determination.
Thank you so much, Jerry Ahmed. That's MP-elect for Wejagba. And before we wrap up, Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, I want to hear from you. I mean, from your perspective, are there any structural reforms that you believe are necessary to strengthen Ghana's parliament independence, especially in what we saw with the judicial interference here and there and its relationship with the executive branch? Any structural reforms we should be looking at?
If we ever have a chance to amend the Constitution, one of the amendments that I will support is the removal of the requirement to have a majority of cabinet members selected from Parliament. I would really want to see the day where there's that strict separation of powers in our context, where if you're a parliamentarian, you're a parliamentarian. If you're a member of the executive, you are the member of the executive. I think it sometimes becomes a little challenging wearing both hats, and especially representing your constituents who may have challenges with a given government policy, but because you're a member of the executive and a minister of state, you may be, quote unquote, forced to be, to be part or to support something that would be at odds with what your constituencies may want or may not want. So that for me is one structural reform that at some point, if we can do some constitutional amendments, I would prefer, or I would love to see that. At the committee level, as I mentioned earlier on, some of those structural reforms have happened by ensuring that I think there are about 4 committees now, very significant committees that would be chaired by the minority party. That for me gives Parliament as an institution an opportunity to be able to exert more oversight, hopefully, over the executive. Now, the last thing I will quickly add is Ghana's Parliament is no different in terms of exercising oversight over the executive, in the sense that the literature will show you that when the ruling party at the presidency is the same as the ruling party, as the majority party in the legislative body, you tend not to get a lot of oversight. In the US, you see more oversight, let's say, when Congress is controlled by a different party and the White House by a different party. So I just wanted to add that caveat that Ghana is not unique in that, but hopefully the reconfiguration of some of these parliamentary committees can help do that.
Okay, let me wrap with Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, but please include what lessons we can draw from the experiences of the 8th Parliament that will help our democracy.
Yeah, one of the lessons which I've already talked about is that if we really want to ensure that there is very little, work on the part of the judiciary relative to parliamentary work, then we need to consider the political question doctrine, that matters of politics have to be dealt with at the parliamentary level so that a judiciary will not come in. If we allow it to stay as it is now, obviously the judiciary will come in, and it's not their fault because there is no strict separation of powers anywhere in the world. But once you have checks and balances, it tells you that other departments should serve as a check on the powers of others, and that is something that we must also deal with. That the issue of my brother Osan Kwapong says that he is looking forward to a situation where if we get opportunity, the mode of selecting members of parliament, the ministers of state, all from parliament, should be looked at again. I have a contrary view. My view is that when we go on that trajectory, you are in the realm of what presidential system, which we have talked against so much that is why we developed this hybrid. But I also understand him that within the hybrid, you can have a dominant feature that looks like presidential. I'm sure that is where I agree with him, right? That yes, in the mode of the hybrid, let us have more dominant presidential feature. Then we can elect members of parliament, people into the executive as ministers outside parliament. Then that one, it help us to build consensus easily, and then you see real critique of parliamentary work and all that. Because in the US, what they call lock rolling, yes, people get to parliament and they are not representing their parties; they are representing the national interest and all that. So we need to find out how we'll be able to deal with this. I am looking forward to a day that we'll be able to throw into legislation a specific number of people. In other words, cap, ministerial appointment. That let it be this number. The 60 John Mahama promise is going to work with. I always believe that it should be 19 and not, because important decisions are taken out of cabinet, isn't it? And the cabinet, the constitution tells you that you can run up to 19. So if it's 19, each minister, 16 regions, each one should have a minister who double as another minister. You supervise one ministry and one region. And the three major important, ministries can be handled by one person. Then 19, we can cut, our bill into that. And I believe that if we are able to do this, it should help Ghana in the 9th Parliament. I expect nothing but the best of performance in the 9th Parliament. But we want to say that when they go wrong, we will not, waste time at all and correct them and make sure that this democracy survives. I want to also thank my student for his kind remarks. I'm humbled by that, but I wish him well. And that I want to tell him that my doors are still open to him for any service that he thinks he requires from me. And I wish every MP the best of luck.
Thank you so much. That is Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, political scientist and the head of European Studies at the University of Ghana. We also had Dr. John Osai Kwapong, CDD fellow. And of course, we spoke to some new entrants, Edem Agbana. And Kofi Ajay is in the studio with me. Kofi, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to get through your slides, but I'm looking forward to it in subsequent bulletins. Thank you all so much. Now, let me leave you with this report on the Kantamanto rebuilding. Some traders are rebuilding their stalls, but will I be able to bring you that report? Well, before that, let's just take a quick break. We'll return with more on the AM show.